The figure eight motion. This is core fundamental. This, along with the 45-degree angle and the movement of the arm and the sine wave, this is a true nonlinear tennis fundamental and one of the main tenets of the program. And it's not just the arm that moves in a figure eight. That was the first thing I noticed, was Agassians, the better players, had this beautiful figure eight in their arm. And I was even told many times, oh, you know, hold your arm up here like a tray and then swing it around and come back up. So people did understand the loop. They used to call it the loop forehand and the loop backhand. But really, the figure eight goes much, much deeper. It really starts in the core and the racket's trailing the whole time. So the real figure eight is right here in your hips. And I like using these swivels because it makes it easy for anyone to understand it. Keeps your head right in the center. You can't move your head. And you learn to move your hips in this continuous motion, right? They never stop and they're always moving slowly. And then out here, you can see the big, beautiful strokes. You know, you can see the volleys. You can see the overhead and the serve. You see the whole game right here in this figure eight. And that is really the beautiful game of Roger Federer. They always said he sort of moves in circles. Well, they had it half right. He moves in two circles in this figure eight. And that's what made him so effortless, right? The momentum would just continue and just get stronger and stronger as you go through. Instead of the old days when you would stop and then start again, right? Here you learn to move continuously from your core out to your periphery, out to your racket head, and you keep it seamless. So you're like a human fabric. And it's almost like a surfer. See this? Figure eight in the surfing, and watch that, and pow. And that's basically how the ball is hit. See that? So it's really about the core doing this nice figure eight, being followed by the arm and the racket. Our nonlinear tennis system embodies the concept of infinity. So what is infinity? Well, infinity is something that's ongoing. A circle would be infinity. See? Never starts, never stops, just keeps going and going. And the figure eight, you can see with my racket, figure eight is another form of infinity. In fact, it is the infinity sign. And you can see it never starts and it never stops. So as you go into one side, it rounds the corner, comes through the other. So it's what they call in science a counter space continuum, meaning as I go into this counter space, it comes around and goes the opposite way. So that's why it's a counter space continuum. And the figure eight is fascinating. If you look in nature, you'll see it everywhere. Fastest animal on the planet, the hummingbird. The only bird, from what I understand, whose wings move in a figure eight. So they can go forwards, backwards very quickly. The fastest animal on the planet. When you see baseball players, you see they're waiting in this kind of infinity, right? They don't just stand there with the bat on there. Same with tennis players. They don't just stand like this. They're moving and they're getting ready to morph into one side of the stroke or the other. And if you really watch, you can see all the strokes in tennis and almost all the strokes, period, in this infinity sign. See, my forehand morphs into my backhand, back to my forehand. Same with the volleys. And you really understand it. In golf, you come up and the hips come around, and this club almost makes a little infinity sign, but it's very, very hard to see. But if you're looking for it, you'll see this infinity all over nature. So it's a very interesting concept, and we utilize it a lot in our nonlinear system. Why is it that we use the figure eight motion in our system? And it is really the basis of the entire system. Well, the figure eight is the mother form of all movement. You see it in all natural athletes. You see it in surfers, skiers coming down a mountain. You see it in a bullwhip action or a fly fisherman. You see it when a tiger pounces on their prey. They move from their core in a figure eight. And so it's very, very quick. The fastest animal on the planet is a hummingbird because its wings move in a figure eight. The figure eight it's archetypal in nature. You see it everywhere if you start looking for it. I mean, if you look at a beautiful tree in the wind, big willow tree. You see the bough moves a little bit and the branches move in a big figure eight off of that little figure eight in the bough. When you see athletes waiting, they're always sort of waiting in this Morpheus type of motion, right? Where they're ready for action. You see everything. You see a surfer, you see a forehand, you see a backhand, you see the serve. The figure eight motion is literally the essence of the game of tennis and the essence of a natural athlete. So if you want to move and play like a natural athlete, really, you want a great figure eight. It is literally the mother form of all movement. Another thing about the figure eight is you hear all the time, coaches telling their athletes, stay balanced, stay balanced. But balance it's too simplistic of a word. Just because I'm standing doesn't mean I'm balanced. Balance represents both sides of your body. So the figure eight motion is perfectly balanced. It's balanced between the right and left side. It's balanced between the vertical and the horizontal. And it's balanced between the lower and the upper. So literally you're in all the different planes with this real pure balance. And I call it dynamic balance because it's balanced while you're in motion. So this balance, what it does is it creates power. It gives you infinite power, really, because you're flowing, but you're flowing from the core. So by the time the momentum gets out to your racket head, things are moving very quickly, and they're actually moving better than quickly because they're still connected to your core. So they're moving with stability and speed. And it's that same balance that you find in the quick movement of a hummingbird, right? They move so beautifully forward and back and quickly. And you see the pinpoint precision of a bullwhip from that figure eight motion. You can put out the wick of a candle. That's the kind of precision you have with this pure, real balance when you're balanced on both sides, up and down, and every which way with the figure eight. So I think balance is something that is inherent in this figure eight motion, and it absolutely helps you to play like a natural athlete. Infinity is actually the mother form of all movement. If you go back past the molecules, past the atom, they talk about string theory. Well, that's a slight little figure eight. So infinity is in the smallest part of your body, and it really is the mother form of all movement, all natural movement. Figure eight. The thing about the figure eight is it's equal on both sides. It's symmetrical. So you're basically having two circles. You see one on the forehand side, one on the backhand side. And that's why people always loved Roger Federer so much. They would even use the word circles. Oh, he just draws circles out there. But it really is this universal stroke that we talk about that is the figure eight. And it's equal. You can see it's mirrored on both sides. And it doesn't matter, which hand you use, or if you use two hands, it's still equal on both sides. That's very important to understand. And then finally, the figure eight, you have to remember, it's not just here in the horizontal. There's vertical equal to the horizontal movement. So that's how the figure eight is created. So you have to always keep in mind the vertical and the horizontal when you're playing, because that is a true figure eight, as opposed to just going back and forth. So the true nature of these curves I talk about is really this idea of being concave, you see this, to convex. See, now that same motion that was concave a minute ago becomes convex here. But on this side, it becomes concave. So you're always morphing from concave to convex. So as I said, there are three schools of thought when it comes to teaching strokes. One is simply the arm motion. I would say A level above that would be this semicircle like this, but you see, you don't stay on the hit too long. You come off of it, so it's very hard to get that kind of timing. You have to play an enormous amount of tennis. And then there's the school of thought that we teach, which is the figure eight motion, starting in the hips and going out to the racket head. And watch how with the figure eight motion, you see my hips are back and I'm creating a coil and creating power. But look, I'm on contact right now at the 45-degree angle. I'm not back here where all the others are, or even back here. I'm literally on the stroke, and then I just stay on the stroke. So I go from small at the 45 to big at the 45. But you see, look, with the figure eight, I rarely have to leave the hitting point. And you see it with all the great players, Medvedev, Federer, all of them. They put their rackets out there, and it's kind of an optical illusion. You think you see the racket moving, but in actuality, the racket's really on the contact point, and it's your inner body that's moving, and that's where you really can crack the whip with that figure eight motion. In conventional tennis wisdom, you'll always hear the same thing. There's lots of different ways to hit the ball, right? Lots of different ways to hit a forehand, lots of different ways to hit a backhand. We don't believe that. We believe that there's a thin red line that goes down all the great players. Doesn't matter if it's Nadal or Federer or Alcaraz or Sinner. They all, to us, we see the similar fundamentals and we see the similar principles in all of their strokes. So ours is literally a closed system. I do not say there's lots of different ways. You can have style, right? You can have style. So maybe some people like to rise up in their figure eight like this, very casual. Maybe others are a little lower like this. Maybe others don't have such a high backswing, but they still line up and stay lined up to the 45 during their hit. So you can have your own style, but these fundamentals, you can see them through all the great players. So in our opinion, at the nonlinear game, there's not a million ways to play. There's one way to understand the whole game, and it's through geometry, through actual science. So where all these other players have to hit thousands of balls a week just to stay grooved, just to stay connected, ours is completely done through science. Ours is done intellectually. I can play left-handed because I know I do the exact same thing as I do on my right side with my left side. So I get my confidence through my intellect, through actually thinking about what I'm doing. Where all these other guys, they get their confidence because they hit millions of balls. And that's the only way they can keep their confidence, is by still hitting millions of balls. But as I said, there are three schools of thought when it comes to teaching strokes. One is simply the arm motion. I would say a level above that would be this semicircle like this. But you see, you don't stay on the hit too long. You come off of it. So it's very hard to get that kind of timing. You have to play an enormous amount of tennis. And then there's the school of thought that we teach, which is the figure eight motion, starting in the hips and going out to the racket head. And watch how with the figure eight motion, you see my hips are back and I'm creating a coil and creating power. But look, I'm on contact right now at the 45-degree angle. I'm not back here where all the others are, or even back here. I'm literally on the stroke, and then I just stay on the stroke. So I go from small at the 45 to big at the 45. But you see, look, with the figure eight, I rarely have to leave the hitting point. And you see it with all the great players, Medvedev, Federer, all of them. They put their rackets out there, and it's kind of an optical illusion. You think you see the racket moving, but in actuality, the racket's really on the contact point, and it's your inner body that's moving, and that's where you really can crack the whip with that figure eight motion. So another great reason you want to use this figure eight motion is because it's better. It's better all the way around. It's better on your body because you absorb the hit with your entire body instead of one little part of your body or two parts of your body. You literally absorb the hit with your entire body from your core out to your racket head. Therefore, it's much more efficient. You see little kids out there getting big power, right? These matches go 5 sets and they go 5-6 hours. You couldn't do that if you really we're not in this flow state, this figure eight state. So the figure eight is not only better for your game, but it's better for your body. I mean, you'll be able to play a lot longer. Talk about a sport for a lifetime. You'll be able to play tennis a lot longer if you move in this figure eight and you hit the ball with this motion that is so natural. And finally, I would say the figure eight is it's great for your mind and your spirit, because when you're in this flow state, it's a lot easier on your mind, right? When you're tense like this and you're moving quickly and digital motion, you really it kind of weighs on your mind and your emotions, and you become kind of stiff. But when you're flowing, it actually helps your mind and it helps you relax on the court, and you're playing in a really relaxed state with this figure eight. So it really truly is better on your emotions and your mind. So all in all, the figure eight motion is just better for you holistically speaking. Another thing about the universal stroke, you see in the best return to servers in the world, they're always waiting like this, right? Agassi, Serena, Rafa, they wait in this continuous slow motion. Sometimes you'll even see them moving their feet like this, getting ready for that serve, because they're ready. This little motion here, this analog return, ready position, right? Instead of just standing there like this or bouncing, this nice flowy ready position, what it does is it gets you ready for either stroke. You see, I morph into the forehand, and then I come back in, and then I morph into the backhand, or even the one-hander. So this universal stroke, you see it's small and tight in here in the ready position, and then it just moves into one stroke or the other. And it really does make a big difference in your game when you stay continuous and slow and you keep this universal stroke. Present day coaching is what I would call observational coaching. And that's all it is. A pro sees what you do and says, oh, I think you need to do this with your wrist. I think you need to do this with your follow through. I think you need to get lower. But it's just their observation. With our system, it's not about what you see necessarily. It's about what you don't see. And another reason why the commentators never quite get it, right? They say, oh, the shoulders rotate. But we know, in fact, that the shoulders follow the hips, and that's what actually creates the coil. So don't think what you see is always what you get. It's really what you don't see that creates the magic. That's the thin red line that goes through all great players, and that magic is geometry. As you remember from science class and math class when you were younger in high school, for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. And that's why the figure eight is so archetypal. It's balanced on both sides. It's never still. It's always morphing into something new. The figure eight, if you think about it, literally represents all of life. It represents the seasons, right? There's no cut and dry time when you go from spring to summer and summer to fall. It just gradually happens, and it's a natural thing. And it's the same with the day-to-day life. You go from night to day and day to night in virtually a figure eight motion, because it gradually starts to get twilight and then a little darker, and the next thing you know, it's pitch black. And then it stays that way, and then all of a sudden it starts to morph into light. There's no definitive time where it becomes light. It just slowly morphs, and it's just this non-linear, slow motion that's always moving. So when you see a natural tennis player and someone you just love their strokes like a Federer, and they look beautiful and look perfectly natural to you, that's because they've locked in and they own their figure eight, and they understand how not only this motion in the center works, but the rising and falling of the racket coming off of it. Many players really feel the figure eight going up and down. They feel this figure eight going up and down, and you see it when they leave the ground. So there's actually a figure eight not only towards the hit itself, but there's also a figure eight going up and down. As I go into my figure eight in the hips, one hip will always be dropped a little, and then the other one rises, and then as they come around, they'll change places, and the left one will rise. And so the hips are always rising and falling. And there's more to it than that. The figure eight, if you've really got it together, it's also different planes. So it's not just vertical and horizontal. It's going in here close and then out to the periphery. So you've got a figure eight now going out away from you, as well as up and down, as well as side to side. So like I always tell my students right from the get-go, you are what you ate. So get your figure eight together from the core out to the racket head, vertical, horizontal, and inner to outer. Get it all together, because that is the natural athlete, and that's the natural tennis player, and that's the way you want to play.